Hey, how's it going, everybody? Happy Thursday. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah, if you celebrated that. Happy Kwanzaa. I believe that's on Saturday. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's when that is. Welcome to another wonderful Cook Along Live. My name is Robert. I'm your host. We are going to be doing a Beef Wellington today. So, as I've said a couple of times on Instagram and with some of the posts that I've made, this is not a super difficult dish to make. It just takes time. There's a lot of steps. It's technical, so each step you just have to make sure is done properly, and at the end you'll be presented with a delicious Beef Wellington. We already took our beef and trimmed it. We did that on Sunday, so if you missed that episode, go ahead and take a look at the YouTube playlist that I have for Cook Along Lives, and you'll see part 1, and that is basically trimming our cannon of beef, as well as putting together our puff pastry, which isn't actually a puff pastry. It's just a nice pastry dough. We'll get into why I'm not using a puff pastry in a bit. It would be a very boring Cook Along Live to show you how to do that, and it would take a long time. So I've had my cannon of filet mignon out of the fridge for about an hour, letting it kind of come up to room temperature. That's just going to help it kind of caramelize down a little bit. I seasoned this about 2 hours ago and let it sit uncovered in the fridge. If you didn't, that's okay. Don't worry too much about it. You can just season it right now. You'll be fine. Leaving it uncovered in the fridge on this nice little tray, make sure that there's no cross-contamination, but also helps kind of dry it out as the salt is pulling moisture out and getting reabsorbed back in. Any of the additional moisture will kind of evaporate in the cold box that is the fridge. So we got that all squared away. We also have our dough that we made on Sunday. I actually this morning made a quiche out of the one that I made on Sunday. So I made a second batch for today, or for right now, this morning. So we're working with a little bit of a warmer dough probably than what you're working with, but it should all turn out the same. So let's get started. We're gonna go ahead and, before we get our pan on, go ahead and turn your oven up to 450 degrees. We're gonna jump over here real quick. We'll get this going to 450. We'll come over to there in a second, and I'm just gonna let that go. Now we're gonna get our pan going. I want this at like medium-high, somewhere around there. I like to start it off a little bit higher and then reduce the temperature. We're not going to try cooking the meat through. That's actually not going to be possible without totally scorching the outside. But we do want to get a good amount of color on the outside. Once we get it kind of browned, get a good amount of caramelization on the outside, we're actually going to put it on the tray and then put it in the oven for about 10 minutes. That's going to help cook the rest of the meat to a more medium rare, or medium if you want to leave it in there a little bit longer. 10-15 minutes for a medium rare, a medium or a medium well. Just gonna let the pan kind of warm up a little bit, and then we'll get cooking. How's everybody doing? I hope you guys are all having a great holiday. Are you taking next week off, or are you guys still working up until New Year's? This is also going to be the last cook along of 2020. So a show that started earlier in this year due to the pandemic has gone the rest of the year. Every week we've had a beautiful show. A couple of them go a little bit smoother than others, but you know, that's the nature of going live. Go ahead and get some olive oil in the pan. You don't want too much oil, and it looks like I'm putting in a lot, but I just want to make sure that I have a nice even coating on the bottom. The steak doesn't absorb any of this or anything like that, so it's just to make sure that we have a nice hot cooking surface down there to sear it with. Waiting on this to heat up just a little bit more. We'll get our beef on there. We're going to start caramelizing it. And let's go ahead and switch to that. Awesome. So we got our oil shimmering, getting just to the point where it's starting to smoke. We're going to go ahead and take our beef and place it. I'm going to put probably the fat side down first. Always lay away from you. That way, if it splatters and you accidentally drop it, it splashes the oil away from you as opposed to splashing it on you. That's never a fun thing. And I'm just going to push down just a little bit just to make sure that the entire cannon of tenderloin is pressed up against the pan. That way you get a nice even browning on that side. I'm not going to bother washing this. We're going to actually sear the outside of this, put it right back on this. This is going into a 450 degree oven. It's going to get sterilized. So we're just gonna let this kind of go. Not really much to do except for watch this cook. While we're waiting, what we could do is actually get this out of the way and start kind of chopping down our mushrooms. So all of the different elements of a beef Wellington, there is, of course, the beef. There is a layer of pastry. It can be puff pastry. It can be the type that we made on Sunday, pâté brisé, I believe is what it's called. Just a really buttery, flaky dough. There's layers of pancetta, and then on top of that, you have a mushroom duxelle, and then you've got your beef on top of that. Now, the reason that this is so difficult to make is because you do have to make the pastry ahead of time. It's not something that you can just whip up right now. It has to sit there and rest. It has to kind of hydrate all the way through. Otherwise, it'll start crumbling instead of being a nice smooth dough. You have to roll it out thin enough to where you don't have a huge piece of bread or pie crust around your meat, but not so thin that it falls apart when you're cutting through it. It needs to retain its shape. So there's a little bit of technicality that goes around with that. Searing the meat and then kind of par cooking it most of the way through before getting it wrapped is another thing that a lot of people don't do. And then when they pull their Wellington out of the oven, it comes out raw because there's no way that the oven is going to be able to cook that entire piece of beef without scorching the pastry. It's just not possible. And the first couple of Wellingtons that I made, that was my problem. The dough was just basically blackened, and the meat was still mostly like on the rare end of medium rare. Not a good look. I actually started sous videing it, which is a great method if that's something that you have, but I didn't want to assume that anybody has a sous vide immersion circulator, so I just we're just gonna roast it in the oven. So give me just a second. I want to see if I put my tongs in the dishwasher, which I think I did, or, yep. So we'll just use this guy. All right, my oven's up to 450. It's on circulation. My dog is upset at something outside, so who knows what. Let's go ahead and check our beef. That's a good amount of sear. I'm gonna go ahead and just rotate it around. And look at that beauty. There we go. You guys can see that. Bezic, don't make me put you in the bedroom. Calm down. He's adorable, he's cute, he's loud. What can I say? So while we're waiting on that, let's go ahead and get our mushrooms going. I'm going to set this over to the side. Hey, stop it. Stop. Quiet. And while we're waiting on that, first thing that I'm going to chop up for my mushrooms is actually my shallots. I'm going to pop off the tops of these guys and then cut them in half by putting them down on the flat side and then just cutting straight through from the top to the bottom. And what this allows me to do is peel the skins off really easily. Just kind of grab the outermost layer and just peel backwards. You'll notice that usually half or more than half of the skin, the outer layer, is actually turning into the paper. And I think my stepbrother and his fiance are here, and that's probably why he's barking. He gets excited when we have visitors. And then you can just pop off all the papery exterior. That way you're not sitting there trying to like mess around with it. Go ahead and peel off this bit as well. And shallots are awesome. They're like little onion concentrates. They're concentrated red onion flavor with a little bit of sweetness. And with these guys here, now that I've peeled them, I'm just going to take off the ends as well. We're going to cut them long ways. And then what I'm going to do with my meat is actually turn this down to a little bit lower, like 350 on my induction. If you have a stove, just kick it down a notch. You want to sear the outside, but you don't want to scorch anything on the bottom of the pan. You do want that brown fond to form, so the little bits that kind of burn to the bottom of the pan, but you don't want those to blacken. So keeping it at like a moderate heat will prevent that from happening. So with our shallots, we're just going to go through and cut them lengthwise, like so. When you get to the end, you can lay that last little bit flat and then chop that through. And we'll do that with the rest of these guys as well. There we go. And there's no particular reason that I'm starting with the shallots. You could start with the mushrooms if you want, but I like to cut the things that are going to make me cry first. That way I can get over them and move on with my life. There we are. Get our garlic ready here. Give this another little rotation, see what that side looks like. Ooh, another beautifully brown side. And that's definitely what you want. You want to hear that sizzle. If you're not hearing that sizzle, the pan's not hot enough. And you'll also notice that on the bottom of my pan, it's getting brown. You're seeing the brown bits start to form, but it's not blackening. It's not like scorching to the bottom. So we're getting a nice, good amount of color on this, and we're getting a nice, good amount of flavor built into it, but we're not overcooking it or giving it any kind of like acrid flavors. So I'm just gonna take my shallots and just kind of pile them up over here on the side. I'm gonna give my garlic cloves a little love tap. Not necessarily to crush them too much, but just enough to kind of separate the skin from the garlic clove. And then we'll get that peeled off. And then we're going to do the same thing with our garlic as we did with our shallots. We're just going to cut it in nice long slivers. And don't be afraid to give your garlic another love tap if you need to, if the skin's not peeling off. There is no shame in giving it a second go. All right, so our garlic, we're going to basically try and find the flattest end, lay it down, and just cut a couple of long slivers down the length of it. And then from there, just cut across once, and that'll give you a nice little dice. Go ahead and make this a separate pile from your shallots. We're going to add it a little bit later after the shallots have had a little bit of time to cook down. So don't mix them in with your shallots. Otherwise, the garlic, which is a lot more delicate, will actually start burning even at the same temperature while the shallots soften, and you don't really want that. Again, that kind of adds a little bit of a acrid, not so nice garlicky flavor. All right, and then our last clove, we'll just do a couple of long slices through here. And then same thing, we'll turn it around, 90 degrees, and just kind of dice through it. We're going to make this a separate little pile over here. Found one little piece that was still a long sliver, so I figured I'd give him a little chop. Now we'll just keep everything separate. All right, let's take a look at this last side of our beef. And ooh, yeah, that looks perfect. If you want, and you're a perfectionist like me, you can go ahead and just give it a couple of seconds on the little blonde edges, the edges that were not cooked by the pan. Hey, Kim, how's it going? Merry Christmas. Give it a go. Give it a go. Give it a go. Yeah, absolutely, Caspro. The sizzle is what you're looking for. Now, you can actually tell if your pan is too hot by the sizzle. This is a nice, healthy sizzle. It's constant. It's warm, I guess, is the way to describe it. It can actually sound like it's spitting at you, where it's just like too hot. It's just like it's even a higher pitch. It's not as rich. Believe me, I'm not crazy. This is a thing. And if you're hearing that, if it sounds like your pan is like spitting at you as opposed to just giving you that nice little sizzle, it's too hot, turn it down. And again, you'll notice at the bottom of my pan, I'm getting a lot of nice little brown bits, but none of them are blackening. None of them are going acrid. None of them are overcooking. Now the next part is going to be a little bit difficult because I want to get the ends, but I don't have my tongs. They're actually in the dishwasher right now washing. So what I might do is grab a clean towel, and I'll sacrifice you to the dirty clothes gods so that I can hold on to the beef. All right, let me give this a little roll and just make sure that there aren't any bits that I missed. Everything looks well done. And I don't mean overcooked well done, I just mean done well. So let's go ahead and stand it up. There we go. Maybe I won't have to sacrifice the towel after all. And if you can, go ahead and tilt the pan just to get the oil. Just make sure that it's well spread along the bottom. And if the beef will stand on its own, cool, let it. If it won't, I mean, you do run the risk of it falling over and splattering, which, you know, I would rather just kind of hold on to it. But if you're confident in your beef remaining erect, you can go ahead and just leave it be. Yes, I am a child. All right, let's see. Grab this and very carefully flip it the other way. And now what I'm going to do, get him back over here. All right, now there's a couple of different ways to do the next step. We're going to take our filet and we're going to coat it with either Dijon mustard or English mustard. Personally, I like Dijon. It's got a little bit of extra flavor. It's essentially just a mustard that is mixed with some white wine, and it makes it really, really tasty. A couple of herbs and things like that as well, just to add some flavor. I like it. If you are a purist and you want to make like a traditional Beef Wellington and you want to say this is an English staple and nobody can mess with it, you should just be using English mustard. I've done it both ways. I prefer Dijon. Sorry, Gordon. I know Gordon Ramsay's going to hate me for that, but that's just how it is in my world. And really, food should be all about your own preferences. It shouldn't matter. If you don't like something, don't use it. Oh, and this might also be a good time to kind of touch on, I'm going to put this on pause for now. If you are making a Wellington and you don't eat meat, you're a vegetarian, you can make this with a butternut squash or any really long, round, tubular kind of vegetable. Or if you want, you could try it with tofu. I have not done tofu, and I think tofu might be a little bit too wet. However, I can imagine that it would be possible. Do the same thing. Sear it on the outside. We're going to put it in the oven, let it kind of cook down. And then if you're doing a butternut squash, you might want to steam it first, just to make it a little bit softer. Because again, the oven's not really going to cook it that well when it's wrapped in pastry. You kind of want to get it pre-cooked before you get that down. And then instead of pancetta, you can use any kind of long, thin, leafy green or long, thin noodles, if that's something that you want to use. Anything, really. So you can definitely do replacements here. Now, I grab a little bit of a pastry brush. And while the Beef Wellington is still ripping hot from the pan, we're going to go ahead and use a spoon. And we're going to get some of this mustard on the beef. Now what's going to happen is, since the beef is still super hot, the meat's actually going to absorb a little bit more of the flavor of the mustard. And you don't need a super thick layer of Dijon or English mustard, whatever you're using here. I want a nice little layer all the way around. And of course, we're going to rotate this around, put it on all sides. And you'll notice that it might even start drying out on you. Like, you'll notice that the mustard is actually kind of absorbing into the meat. That is what you are looking for. Hey Felicia, how's it going? Merry Christmas, happy holidays. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a little bit of a spin. We'll continue on this side. Felicia is one of my favorite viewers. She lives in Georgia. Met her when I was living out there with an ex of mine. Wonderful person, loves food, and has a lot of really, really fun animals. Unfortunately, I moved my cook-along lives from Friday nights to Sunday nights, and she was not able to continue to watch because she already has a standing get-together with another friend on those nights. So, unfortunately, lost her as a viewer, but that's okay. I hope that she goes and watches them at the, when she has a chance. And she pops in on days like today when she has a chance and it's not a Sunday. Now, keep an eye on, especially if you're using a normal brush, you might get loose some of the little pieces of brush onto your beef. Just kind of keep an eye, and if you see any, just pick them off. We want to get this entire Wellington coated, or the entire fillet coated. And we're doing this before we put it in the oven, because as it roasts in the oven, it's going to absorb even more of that flavor. Just make sure you get a nice worked in amount of Dijon here. Okay, cool. You'll notice I used a spoon so that I'm not dipping meat back into my jar of Dijon mustard. Let's go ahead and rotate and just make sure. I'm going to keep this kind of craggly side up. Go ahead. Go. All right, we're going to put this into our oven. I'm going to put it in for about 10, maybe 12 minutes. I want this whole thing, I mean, this is what, 4 or 5 inches thick. I mean, it's a pretty big hunk of meat. We're going to go ahead and just make sure that that gets cooked as much through as we can. I like mine to be about a medium rare to a medium. So 10 minutes, 12 minutes should be good at 450. So move over, toss that into our oven, and we're good to go. Get this guy's out of the way. We'll move on to continuing with our duxelle. Now we've got all those beautiful brown bits in the bottom of our pan over there. We are actually going to use our shallots to kind of deglaze any of those that are stuck on the bottom, as well as some sherry and our garlic, and then we're going to add our mushrooms to all of that to absorb all the flavor and cook off all of the moisture that's in the mushrooms. I'm doing fantastic. Ooh, yes, cookies. Stream it. We're just going to keep this back up at our medium heat, so 350 is what I have it set on my induction. If you are using just a flame, just try and gauge where you were cooking your beef, and that'll be perfect. Hey Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes. I'll check my meat after 10 minutes, and then I'll adjust if I need to. So, before we put any of this into our pan, so actually let's pause that again. Let's go ahead and clean our mushrooms up. I like to remove the stems. This makes it a little bit easier to chop them down. Totally up to you if you want to leave them in. And then if I see any large deposits of grit or dirt, I'm going to brush them off. We're going to go ahead and get these guys diced down. If you have a food processor, feel free to use your food processor. A lot of recipes use a food processor. It's a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. However, it tends to kind of, I don't know, liquefy or gellify your mushrooms. And instead of getting a nice textured layer of diced mushrooms, you'll really end up with like a mushroom paste. Not necessarily a bad thing. However, I think that having a nice, I don't want to say thick cuts of mushroom or thick diced mushroom, but like a normal diced mushroom works a lot better than a food processor. That's also why I don't use a food processor to make my salsa. You guys remember the very first cook along live, we hand cut a pico de gallo, and same thing, if you throw all those tomatoes into a food processor, you're just going to end up with a tomato goo as opposed to defined pieces of tomato. And kind of the same story here. So you should have somewhere around 16 ounces of mushrooms. I'm going to start with my baby bellas here first, then we'll move on to the cremini. And really all I'm going to do is lay them flat, tap down, and just cut them lengthwise. Now we're going to go over our cutting technique again. I know I do that in a lot of the videos that I do, but it's always good to review for any new viewers who might not have seen a previous video. When you're cutting through anything, really, you should always kind of form your hand into a claw. It should almost look like, oops, I still haven't changed my egg. You really want to make your hand into a claw, like this. You want to keep essentially your knuckles flat so that your knife has a guide to go up and down, and you want to keep your pinky and your thumb kind of tucked behind everything. This way it's almost impossible, unless you're doing this kind of a thing, it's almost impossible to cut yourself. You're using your knuckle as a guide, and everything is curved back behind where you're actually wanting to cut. So as you're cutting up and down, you can just kind of move your hand back, and that'll move the knife back. It speeds the process up quite a bit. So you'll notice that I've got it down on a nice flat edge, nice flat surface. I'll claw as best I can, and then I can just literally go up and down and just move my fingers back and just really kind of jump through the mushroom or anything. Now, some things are round inherently and they don't have a flat surface. If that's the case, you can always just kind of slice a little flat edge off and then use that. And then same thing, just claw yourself and you can go right through whatever it is that you're cutting. And then even that flat side that you cut off, if it's too thick, you can just go ahead and slice that up as well. In my opinion, this is the best way to cut. It's the safest way to cut. The speed will come, especially when you first start. This is a very uncomfortable kind of way to hold your hand. And as you do it more and more, you'll get more and more used to it. You'll also notice if we switch to my head-on view here, do this kind of a thing. Window that keeps popping up, I don't know why. You'll notice that I'm not holding the knife straight. I'm not trying to cut like perpendicular to the cutting board. I'm actually cutting across my body, or I'm turning my body if I want to do straight. This is not, it's not really even ergonomically possible. So just let the knife go where the knife wants to go. The knife is going to be across your body, 45 degrees, and you're doing your claw. And just slice right through the mushroom, slice through right whatever else it is that you're cutting. I use the exact same technique when we were doing the shallots and the garlic, and I'll use it anytime that I'm cutting anything on my cutting board. There we go, the last of the bellas. And this looks like a ton of mushrooms. Guess what? This is gonna reduce in our pan when we're cooking it down to almost half of what this pile looks like. Thank you, Felicia. Yeah, the intention with that little stinger spinny thing was to have it change with every cook-along. And I never have time, or I always forget to update it. So it's still been the egg, and that's been from I think like 3 or 4 cook-alongs ago. And before that, it was a cupcake for like 5 or 6 cook-alongs. So yeah, well, I like it. I want to get better at updating it. However, I haven't quite gotten there yet. All right, cool. Mushrooms are here. I'm just going to line them up as best I can. And then another cutting technique. I'm just going to hold my knife now across me. Put 3 fingers on the edge, or 2 fingers if that's more comfortable. Just make sure that everything is behind whatever's holding the knife down. And we're just going to put it down on the cutting board and rock it up and down. Let's see if we can do this. So essentially just like this. I can hold the knife down with my fingers. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this side. It's just to kind of keep it supported and stabilized. And then we're just going up and down. And then I'm essentially just going to rock the knife through the mushrooms. And this is going to give me a nice little dice. This is how I chop parsley if I'm doing tabbouleh. This is how I chop a big pile of stuff like these mushrooms. You can lift up this side. Just make sure that you're lifting up both the knife and your fingers. I'm actually using my right hand to kind of lift up my left hand, my left fingers here, in order to do that so that the knife isn't like flying around all over the place on the left hand side. And then that'll allow you to just kind of quickly dice through these mushrooms now. When a claw won't necessarily work. And the pile is actually even a little bit bigger than, you know, what the knife would comfortably be able to cut through. This works a little bit nicer. And then you're just going to do 2 or 3 passes through, and you'll get a nice little dice. Now, make sure that you dice these down. You don't want long pieces of mushroom because we are going to be cooking these down and rolling them as a layer. So you do want to make sure that it is a nice uniform-ish size. take your time when you're cutting these guys down. And also realize that your knife is usually curved, so just follow the curve of the knife to make sure that it goes all the way across and cuts everything. There we go. That's starting to look pretty darn good. Maybe one more run through. You'll notice I'm essentially just kind of piling them up into a long straight column, or a long straight row, I guess. That's a little bit less wide than my knife is long. And then I'm just kind of cutting through that way. Obviously in a food processor, this process would be a little bit quicker, because you would just throw all the mushrooms into the food processor for about a minute and you're done. But again, you're not going to have a nice identifiable mushroom dice. You're going to have just a paste. It's going to be like a black kind of sludge. And like I said, I've done that before. It works okay, but I generally tend to prefer to do this, even if it takes a little longer, just because you can identify what you're eating. There we go. Plus, when you're making all this racket in the kitchen, your kitchen actually sounds like a kitchen. What it should sound like. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this cooking. Wipe off some of that Dijon. Again, back at that medium heat, like 350-ish. We're going to let that warm back up. We've got a lot of really good brown bits here on the bottom, which is fine. That's exactly what we want. We're going to start with our shallots in the pan. There is a little bit of oil in here. We might need to add a little bit more, but I'm going to wait until this heats up, because then I'll actually get to see what, how much oil I have in there. As it cools, as it kind of dries down, the oil starts actually sticking to the metal, and it doesn't really want to swish around all that much. So once you heat it back up, you can see that now we're actually able to see where all the oil is. Plus, you might even have some moisture left from your fillet in the pan, so we're going to kind of see if any of that separates out. All right, so our baby bellas are done. I'm going to go ahead and kind of slide them up to the top of the cutting board, like so. And again, keeping them separate from the garlic and the shallots. And I'm going to start cleaning my white mushrooms, otherwise known as Cremini mushrooms, in the same fashion. Any like big pieces of dirt. Hey Siri, stop the timer. And just kind of brush them off. And then I'm going to take out all the stems. And that was our beef. So let's go take a quick look at that. We can switch over to here. Hello. And that looks fantastic. Let me grab a pot holder. And really all I'm going to do is kind of press on it just to see how it feels. I'm going to let that go for another 5 minutes. If you want to be really good about this, you should absolutely use a meat thermometer, instant read or even a slower read one, and just leave it sticking out the side if it's oven safe, and make sure that your meat cooks to the temperature that you want it at. I'm just kind of eyeballing it or guessing, so mine actually might not come out as perfect as I want, but that's the nature of doing it live. Hey Siri, set a timer for 5 minutes. I always love that little bit of anxiety-inducing, oh, is my meat going to be cooked? All right, that looks like a good amount of oil for now. I'm going to go ahead and get our shallots. We're going to put it into the pan. We want that nice, rich, healthy sizzle. We don't want it spitting at us. We don't want the shallots trying to jump out of the pan, which they will if your pan is too hot. We also don't want it to be dead. If you're not getting any kind of a sizzle, your pan is not hot enough. You're not actually cooking anything. You might be wilting it, but you're not cooking it. All right, there we go. Everything in the pan. Just gonna kind of rearrange, move my garlic over here to the side. And let's see, I should have a wooden spoon. Go ahead and get these guys moving around. Make sure that they all have a little bit of oil on them and make sure that they're all broken up. And we're going to let these guys kind of cook down and caramelize. You'll notice that some of the brown bits from the bottom of the pan are already kind of releasing and mixing in with the shallots. This brown color on the shallots is not caramelization, it's actually the bits of meat releasing. And that's what we want. We're going to do that. We're going to add a little pinch of salt. And that'll help the shallots kind of release some of their moisture, as well as season them a bit. Don't over-season these. Just put a little bit. And we're just going to let those guys kind of sweat down and start caramelizing. Cool, cool. Let's continue on with our mushrooms. Get all of these little stems off of the Cremini mushrooms. And then every so often we are going to want to go back to our shallots there so they don't start sticking to the bottom of the pan or overcooking or burning. Cooking is definitely an all senses sport. So right now I'm actually listening to the shallots as they're kind of sizzling away. I'm also smelling them because you'll start to smell them caramelizing or burning if they go a little too far. And of course my fingers and hands and everything for the mushrooms. Go ahead and give these guys a little stir. Getting some nice caramel color on these guys. Set them over there. Now the reason I'm putting my wooden spoon on the hot pan, wood doesn't really absorb heat. It's a very poor conductor of heat. So if I just leave it there, it's actually going to be pretty fine. Don't do that with a metal spoon or a metal anything. You will probably scorch yourself like Marv from Home Alone. Which I haven't actually watched this year. I should probably get on that. And you'll notice here that I'm able to actually kind of cut through these mushrooms pretty quick while I'm waiting for my shallots to caramelize. And I can talk to you guys in the camera without cutting myself. So, pretty cool skill to have. Again, all of that comes with time. So don't like learn this skill and then the very next day try and go and start doing advanced things. You'll probably hurt yourself. And that's not the goal. The goal is to keep you safe. All right, most of the way through my mushrooms, give this another stir. We're getting some caramelized onion on the bottom, which is fine because we're actually going to also deglaze this with either a stock of your choice or a nice dry sherry. And that's a little trick that I picked up from the guys over at Chef's Steps. They're the ones who make the sous vide pump that I use, and also they've got a lot of really good recipes over there. They do a lot of the modernist stuff where they use chemicals and other kind of avant-garde techniques, and they can come up with some really cool looking dishes. And then they also apply that to normal cooking so that we can experience some of the awesome stuff that they're doing as well. If you're in the market for a sous vide pump, I highly recommend theirs. I'm not sponsored by them. Hey Siri, stop the timer. But they make an awesome product. And I've actually gone through 3 sous vide pumps. One was a Kickstarter, which was actually pretty cool. The other one was an Anova, which I sent back. And the third one was theirs, and I always go to theirs. All right, look at the color on these onions. Nice and brown. So now at this point, we're going to go ahead and add our garlic to the pan. Not for very long. We just want to put it in there for about a minute. And I don't know why my dog is going crazy again. Hey, doggo. Hey, stop it. Stop it. People don't want to hear you barking. Or do you? If you want him to bark, I mean, I can find ways to make him bark. Now you'll notice that I stopped the timer on my meat, and I haven't gone to check it yet. I am aware of that. And I'm kind of keeping that in the back of my mind as I stir my garlic in. I'm really just going to give this about another minute. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our sherry and deglaze. Hey, Michael, how's it going, man? Good, healthy bit of sherry down on the bottom. Again, you can use about a cup of stock if you don't have sherry. It'll work just as well. And this is also going to help kind of break up some of those brown bits on the bottom. You'll notice that they're wiping up very easily, and they're actually getting infused into the sherry. The alcohol is cooking off, and this is going to create a really nice syrupy bottom. Once the sherry has kind of syruped up, we're going to add our mushrooms. Still thinking about that beef. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. But look at the color of that. Look at the color of that broth essentially down here. And the bottom of our pan, I have a round spoon, but if it was a square spoon or a spatula, I'd be able to scrape up all of it. And this would just be a nice clean pan. There we go. We'll just let that cook down while we go and check our meat. And we're back. Let's check this bad boy. All right, that feels good. I'm going to go ahead and remove him from the oven, get that stopped, and we're just going to set him to the side to rest. If you would like, you're more than welcome to very carefully grab your mustard and give it another little bit of a slather. I'm good. I'm just going to leave it the way that it is. All right, so this is cooking down. While we're waiting on this to kind of reduce, we're going to go ahead and start chopping the next bunch of our mushrooms. You'll notice that nothing that I've done so far is all that crazy. Like, we're not doing anything super advanced or super difficult or anything like that. There's just a lot of steps that have to happen in the same order each time for this to be a successful dish. And I want this window to go away. I'm doing fantastic, Michael. Had a great year, great end of the year. Awesome real estate year, all things considered. Great year being a trainer at Keller Williams. Fantastic time with the technology. And of course, you know, hit my goal of doing a cook-along every week for the entire year, or the entire rest of the year, I should say, once we started. So that's all going very well. All right, our sherry is starting to cook off finally. While it's going, I'm just going to continue with my mushrooms. I'm actually going to turn this down just a bit to kind of slow it down. I have control over the timing. All this is doing is simmering and burning off or boiling off and concentrating the flavor. I don't want it to go as fast because I'm still chopping a couple of mushrooms, so I'm just going to give it take it down a notch. Still keep it warm enough to simmer, but not warm enough to boil away. And we'll just take our time here with our mushrooms. Second set of mushrooms. Kim, honestly, the meat is very close to being completely cooked. If you're doing this in like a sous vide cooker, just cook the meat all the way. The pastry is not going to be in the oven long enough to take the meat very much further than where it is right now. Plus, the meat is so thick, and the heat has to go through 3 layers of pastry, prosciutto, mushroom, and the meat. It takes it so long to cook if you actually want to add to the doneness of the meat. So yeah, mine is pretty much cooked as much as I want it to be. And then the putting the meat back in the oven is essentially just reheating it. If you want to take it like a step below, that's great, but you want to get it most of the way there. So if you like a medium steak, take it to medium rare when you're, roasting it, and then cook it maybe a little bit longer in the oven, but then you run the risk of burning the pastry. So you just got to, it's always a delicate balance, and it really kind of depends on how thick the meat that you're using is. In this case, I've got a pretty thick piece of meat, so I'm pretty confident that the center's not going to cook anymore. So I wanted to take it as close to being done as I could. that's another thing with cooking. Everything about cooking is your choice. It's your preference. You get to do whatever you want, whatever you like. But it also means that you have to kind of think about what you're doing. Even if you're reading a recipe and the recipe says do one thing, if you sit there and think about it, you don't have to think that hard about it. Sometimes they'll tell you like, hey, take this huge roast, throw it in the oven for an hour, and pull it out and it'll be done. And the roast is 5.5 inches thick. And if you really kind of sit there and think about it, you're like, well, it's still probably going to be rare in the middle because all that heat has to go all the way through the meat and bring it up to whatever temperature you want it. Doesn't make sense. So maybe that'll prep you and you'll be thinking ahead a little bit and you'll be like, okay, cool, maybe I should cook it a little bit longer than that. I was actually talking to my cousin about that just before we started this cook along and saying how, you know, on part of the reason that I like to do these live, and it might be a 2.5-hour episode, 3-hour episode, but I don't want to throw something in the oven and then pull something else that's already done out, because I could tell you that I cooked that for an hour or 30 minutes or 25 minutes, and it might have actually taken me 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And then you're seeing this beautiful thing that I made, and you're like, oh, when I cooked it for 20 minutes, it came out and it was still like doughy or floury or gross or whatever. And then your confidence takes a hit, even though nobody did anything wrong. It's just the nature of cooking. So this is all cooked almost all the way down. Oh, and you guys can't see me. I did not switch my camera. There we go. So all of this is cooked almost all the way down. You can see that it's nice and caramelized, looks great. We're gonna start adding our mushrooms. Sorry about that camera switch snafu. Just didn't even think about it. Remembered my meat, didn't remember the camera. Go ahead and get these into the pan and just kind of flatten them out. You'll notice I did not add any more oil yet. I want to see how the mushrooms do. There's a lot of moisture in the mushrooms. And as soon as they hit the heat, they're going to start releasing all of that moisture. Thanks, Christina. It's actually an oven, roaster, air fryer, everything. Does quite a bit of stuff. And I've got this on a low heat. I've got it on like a 275. I might turn it up just a bit, maybe 325. But again, I'm not really looking to sear the mushrooms. I just want to get them hot enough to start releasing the moisture and evaporating that moisture away. I'm going to start mixing those mushrooms in to the onions and the sherry. And you'll notice at the bottom of the pan is clean. Like none of that brown bits, none of the caramelization stuff that was down there is still there. It's all been deglazed. It's all that flavor is in the mushrooms. Now the mushrooms and the onions, the shallots, I should say, and the garlic. All of that flavor is concentrated into there. And that's what people say when they say we're adding layers of flavor. You're literally just saying, cool, I love the flavor of caramelized onions, I'm going to add it. I love the flavor of garlic, I'm going to add it. I love the flavor of beef, so we're going to sear our beef first, and then when we deglaze it, we're going to add it. You are literally layering flavors on top of each other. And speaking of layering flavors, and you'll notice that a lot of moisture is coming out of these mushrooms. I haven't added any additional oil or water or anything. And look at all the steam that's coming off, and look at all the water at the bottom of the pan. Speaking of layering flavor, you know what flavor I really like? I love the flavor of fresh thyme. So we're actually going to add some thyme sprigs. There we are. To our duxelle. That's going to take a little bit of time to, a little bit of time. See what I did there? Anyway, don't worry, I won't give up my day job. The time that it's going to take for the moisture to evaporate, we'll have plenty of time to pick off the leaves of our herbs. So I'm going to grab a couple of these sprigs. I'm going to separate them out into the long, full sprig. Now, if you have a very woody piece like this, I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to come back to that one. But I'm going to try and get all the soft pieces, the soft, long pieces of thyme like this. I'm going to get maybe 5 or 6 of them. We've got quite a bit of mushrooms over there, and I don't want the flavor of the thyme to get lost in the flavor of everything else. I'm going to try and, here I've got a couple of small leaf shoots coming off of this main stem. I'm going to pull those guys off to the side. So we got 6 of those. We got that little bit over there. We've got these kind of small pieces. So I'm going to set those right there. I'm just going to pick the leaves off. And I know that this seems like it's tedious work. However, you only have to pick the leaves off of these smaller pieces of thyme. And when I say pick the leaves off, there are some of these where there's like 3 or 4 leaves stuck together. Like so. I'm not sure if you guys can see that or not. Maybe I'll switch over to this camera. You can see that there's like 2 leaves or 3 leaves that are stuck together. The little stem on the bottom is soft, like very soft. It's actually going to dissolve when it's cooked. That's fine. You can consider that one leaf, right? What I'm really looking to avoid are the big pieces of woody bits of thyme. I'm trying to avoid like the long stems. The stems are soft-ish, but they're not going to break down. You're going to pull a stem out of your teeth, or you're going to pull a stem out of the actual sauce. That's not what I'm looking for. These longer pieces are actually super easy. The very tip is very, very soft, but you'll find a spot about 2 leaves down where it's a little bit thicker. You hold on to that with one hand, and literally just go with the other and pinch backwards and just slide all of these leaves off in your hand. And then if you need to, just go back and kind of pinch off the bunches of leaves from the tip. And again, trying to leave that main stem in one piece so that we can get rid of it, but pulling off the leaves, again, peel them back, nice little handful of leaves, and then we'll just kind of pick the other ones off. Really doesn't take all that much time to do. And number one, you don't get any of the flavors from the stems, which there's not very much flavor there anyway. But if there are any off flavors or anything, you're just avoiding them. And number two, you're making sure that nobody gets like a huge thyme stick in the roof of their mouth, which is, I've done that. It's not fun. There we go. I'll just get this piece off like so. And then this last couple of woody bits, I'll just kind of break them up. Throw away the stem and keep the leaves as best you can. This one here, just do that. And that. And there we go. Cool. Ding, time is done. All right, go back to our overhead view. We'll see that our mushrooms are starting to dry out, which is great. They're starting to become almost like a singular mass of mushrooms, as opposed to a bunch of diced mushrooms. And you'll notice that all of them, even the Cremini mushrooms, the white mushrooms, are a nice golden brown. That's all the flavor from the beef, that's all the flavor from the shallots, that's all the flavor from the garlic being absorbed by the mushrooms after they've released all of their water. All right, we're gonna go ahead and add our thyme leaves in here. We'll get those a nice little stir. In a pinch, you can use dried thyme if you have a little spice jar of it. I think that'll work okay. The flavor will be a little bit different. It'll be a little bit more subtle flavor. All right, now, stupid window, go away. All right, cool. Let's see, what have I missed? Hi, Christina, Merry Christmas. Hey, Cindy, thank you for letting me know. I figured that out a couple of minutes later. And also Kim, thank you so much. And Christina, yes, yes, yes. All right, cool, going okay, Happy Christmas, yep, yep, yep. Aspro, yes, and X. We're not gonna get into that story. All right. We're gonna go ahead and keep cooking these guys down. You basically want to keep them moving now at this point until they stop sizzling. You're gonna notice that they're actually gonna start wanting to stick to the bottom of the pan. That's how you know that they're done. All the moisture is gone, all the water is gone, it's been released. And you're just left with mushrooms. Now the reason that we're trying to cook off all of the moisture is we're wrapping a juicy steak inside of a puff pastry or inside of a buttery pastry. What doesn't go very well with bread? Moisture. So if you have a ton of moisture from your mushrooms wrapped around a ton of moisture in your meat and you throw it into an oven to roast it, all of that moisture is going to start coming out and your entire Wellington is going to be soggy and not going to be to the level that I'm sure that you're going to want it to be. So you really want these mushrooms on low heat or like medium-low heat here. You're not trying to sear them, you're not trying to caramelize them, you're just trying to cook off the moisture from them and get them as dry as you possibly can. And you'll notice that even the fillet, we started with the fillet, it was probably 12 inches across. Make sure that that's not super hot. It's actually shrunk down quite a bit. When we had it on the tray earlier, it was at least this big, so we've lost about an inch and a half of actual width. So we've actually lost a lot of moisture from our tenderloin as well, which is good. You want to lose that moisture. However, plan ahead. If you're cooking for a large group, just make sure you have a long enough piece of meat so that when it loses that moisture, you don't actually end up shortchanging anybody, because that's always sad. Keep cooking these mushrooms down. We're almost done. I am starting to have to kind of scrape them up off of the pan. They're not sticking very hard, which is a good thing, but they're just about there. And the great thing about all this deglazing and everything is, of course, as you can see, I'm moving these shallots and mushrooms around on the pan. The pan itself is still clean. Like, there's things that are starting to kind of stick to it, but for the most part, this pan is going to be very easy to clean when we're done. And there we go. Now, the higher the heat in the pan, the more likely you are to start kind of scorching these guys to the bottom. So just keep it at like just above a temperature that'll allow the water to boil away, the moisture in the mushrooms to boil away, but not so hot that you're, I keep saying you're not trying to sear them. That's exactly what I mean by that. You're just trying to get rid of the water and the moisture. All right. Now, I'm going to do a little taste. Make sure that they're seasoned enough. Actually, that's not bad. All we did was add a little bit of salt to the shallots. I might add just a little bit more, just a touch, not very much. We'll get that kind of mixed in as well. We don't want to over salt it because then you can actually ruin the Wellington if you over salt the mushrooms. That is also a testament to how reducing and concentrating the flavor affects things. We only added that little bit of salt at the beginning. All the water got released, and from the mushrooms, and then it all boiled away. And so that little bit of salt got absorbed by everything that was left. And so it tastes very well seasoned, even though we didn't add that much salt. We added the thyme towards the end, and the reason that we did that is so that we don't burn those leaves. Because we want the flavor, and we want it to be infused, but we don't want to have that scorched flavor, and thyme is super delicate. You can actually probably add it even after you're done evaporating the water. And now you'll notice that I'm scraping it off the bottom of the pan. The pan is still staying clean, but things are starting to stick. So I think we've gone about as far as we can go. We'll go ahead and turn that off. Things moving just for a second. And there's our duxelle. Hey Casper, the great thing is this is always on YouTube. I have the recordings, so just remember that you are about an hour and 9 minutes in. And go ahead, hit up my YouTube channel, subscribe, and pick it up. It's in a Cook Along Live playlist, and just jump right back in. Then you can catch the finale when you are able to. Hope you have a wonderful Merry Christmas Eve, and I will see you in the next one, man. I wouldn't recommend rehydrating it. There's enough moisture in the pan, Christina, for the time to kind of rehydrate itself, you are going to get a more subtle flavor. And the problem with rehydrating it is there's a chance that you'll actually lose some of that flavor into the water, unless you pour all the water in there as well. Kind of an option. I would actually be interested to see which one worked better. A good point. I would probably just sprinkle it right in, but you can definitely try rehydrating it. Cool. So we've got our duxelle done. We've got our beef done. Our next step is to roll out our pastry. No, it's not. Our next step is to roll out our prosciutto, or parma ham if you have it. So what I'm going to do is actually use a bench scraper to kind of clean off my cutting board here. Get all these mushroom bits off. If I weren't doing a cook-along, I would probably take this over to the sink and just give it a quick rinse, but this will work well enough for this purpose. And it's still going to taste amazing, so it doesn't really matter. There we go, nice clean cutting board. And we'll grab our dough that we made on Sunday, and by Sunday I mean this morning because I already used my Sunday dough. I made a double batch. You don't have to do this. A single batch actually would have been fine for what I had. I just wanted to make a little bit extra just in case. I'm also cooking a Wellington for six people. 6 people. So I just wanted to make sure I had enough. If you're doing for 4, a single batch will be fine. Again, even a single batch will be fine for 6. Now, we've been refrigerating this. You might have been refrigerating this since Sunday. This is going to take a little bit of effort to work it up. It's cold, it's hydrated, it's rested, it's just chilling. There's a lot of butter in here. And if you've ever worked with cold butter before, you know it's not super easy to mash it around or flatten it or do any of that stuff. So just take your time and actually use your rolling pin and just kind of give it a couple thwacks. And essentially what you're trying to do is just flatten it out just a bit. I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to hurt your dough. I can almost guarantee you you're not going to hurt your cutting or your rolling pin. Depending on what your work surface is, you might destroy a wooden table or something, but we're just going to kind of give this a nice little flattening out. Just to soften it. Now, if you're using puff pastry, don't do this. That will be a lot more supple, a lot more easy to roll out. Well, it's actually not going to be that much more easy to roll out, but it's going to be a little bit easier to work with overall. But just don't be afraid to give it a couple of good thwacks. Again, you know, we were love tapping our garlic. These are more like anger taps. So there's no love anymore. We're just trying to flatten out our dough. And I promise my fingernails are actually clean. That's mushrooms, so please don't judge me. They were absolutely clean before we started. And the mushrooms got under there. Now, we're not in any hurry. It's okay if our beef comes down in temperature. It's okay if our mushrooms kind of cool off. Like, that's totally fine. We actually don't want the mushrooms to be super hot. So the fact that they're not sizzling anymore, they're just kind of chilling on the side, totally cool. Don't worry about either of those. Those are both fine. What we're going to be focusing on right now is just making sure that our dough is nice and flat. You'll notice that every so often I'm rotating it about 45 degrees, 90 degrees, I guess, and just kind of making sure that it stays almost circular in shape. And then I'm going to give it a couple of rolls just to see if it's worked out enough. Not quite. So I'm going to go ahead and give it another couple of thwacks. I'll just go ahead and rotate it. You'll notice that as it gets a little bit longer in one way, I'll rotate it and then kind of pound it out so that it gets a little bit longer in the other way. All right, so now I've gotten it flattened out just a bit. We're at about 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna go ahead and get you out the way. Give my cutting board a nice little dust. This is because I know that the butter is going to start melting and I don't want it sticking. Go, just a little bit on the top. There we are. Any little bits that fall off, feel free to taste your work. Now, we're going to start very gently rolling this out into a long, flat disc. Now, you'll notice that my hands are on the outside of my rolling pin. I don't like using the actual holds. I just don't feel like they do that much. You're not able to put as much pressure on because the actual dowel that goes through, or the metal piece that goes through, the axis, will actually bend and absorb some of your pressure. So just hold, basically put all the pressure on the edges, and you're just gonna roll that way. I don't like rolling in the middle because then the point of pressure is right in the middle of the dough, and you'll actually start kind of squeezing things out. Trust me, I've done a lot of experimentation. That is actually the case. Doesn't really make sense because you're working with a huge piece of wood, but that is how things work. So we're just gonna have our pressure on the outside. Just roll it out nice and long. And you know what? I forgot to do the Parma ham, even though I mentioned that that's what we were gonna be doing next. So what I'm gonna do, we're gonna roll this out into a circle, and we're just gonna set it aside. Get our ham ready. There we go. Now these pieces here are kind of starting to separate. Actually, just gonna kind of fold them right over on top of each other and just press them together. They'll end up kind of marrying into one another later. Cool, so that's done. Let me grab a plate. To just kind of set this on. Let's get our ham going. All right, so the first step with the ham, we actually want to put a nice long piece of cellophane or plastic wrap out on our cutting board or our work surface. The fact that we have flour down is not going to make a difference because we're going to have the cellophane out first. And I like to put my super long piece of cellophane right at the top of my cutting board, like so, and just pull it across. And I like to give myself a little bit of an overlap on the bottom, and then just make sure that up at the top there is no like air gap between the cellophane and the roll. Now we're going to grab our ham, which could be Parma ham, it could be prosciutto. I'm just using prosciutto. Keep this cold until you use it. This stuff will start melting. The fat will start melting into your hands when you're handling it. And that also means that it'll stick to itself quite a bit. So try not to handle it as much as you can. Now I have to be smarter than the package. So we will be smarter than the package. We'll just choppity chop. And that should let us peel it open. A, B. There we go. We're going to pull our Parma ham out, or our prosciutto out, in one large block. And essentially what we want to do, I'm just going to set it there for now. We're looking to get enough of that down on the plastic so that we can put our tenderloin on top of it. So you want it to be at least as wide as your tenderloin, maybe just a little bit of overlap. So I'm looking at, I don't know, maybe 8 inches wide. So that's what I'm going to try and do. Now you want your cellophane to be as flat as you can. That's why I put it up here and just kind of roll it out, because it lets it stay nice and flat against the board. If it has a couple of holes in it, that's fine. If you have a little tear or a little rip, it's not going to affect it very much. And what I'm going to do is do my best to peel these all off in one, separate them, essentially, without getting them combined or like ripping them. Try to keep them in one piece if you can. Sometimes it's not possible and it becomes a huge pain. Just work slowly and gently. And try and keep the main bit of prosciutto down flat. And use your other hand to peel. That way you're not touching the main bit and, potentially ripping it. Now this particular piece was actually folded over on itself, so I'm going to try and unfold it. I'm going to keep my hand on the little piece of paper so that doesn't stick to the prosciutto. I'm going to try and unfurl this. Now this is always, in my opinion, the most difficult part of the Beef Wellington. Just because it's a test of patience. Christina, I have not tried a French rolling pin. I know that they're tapered on both ends. That actually kind of scares me, just because then again the pressure is not uniformly distributed across the entire roller. I'll go ahead and set this down. I'm gonna make sure I give myself at least 4-ish inches on each side. I'm gonna try and get this laid out as flat as I can. And then I'm gonna peel a bit of plastic away, like so. I've seen them, they look really cool. I just kind of afraid. Don't think that that style would work for the way that I roll things out. I know it gives you a little bit more flexibility in pressing and adding pressure to kind of coax the dough in different directions. However, trying to be gentle and talk to y'all at the same time, I'm not sure that will be a good thing for me or not. In any case, I do want a wider rolling pin. This one's kind of narrow. And I'm starting to tear it up on the ends here, but that's okay. We're just we'll do our best to keep this all in one piece. And again, any bits, I'm just going to snack on. And then I'm going to go ahead and, again, overlap just a bit. Just put the uniform side over the previous one. And that'll fill in any gaps or any tears. And we'll peel this off like so. Now this isn't going to be perfect unless you have a butcher do this and have them like totally separated. But you can do your best to get it as perfect as you can. Once I get this piece separated, I'll take a look at the chat, because I think I see it scrolling by. I'm not able to really focus on that while I'm working on this. And again, this is in my opinion, the most difficult, just because it's kind of the most tedious part of making the Beef Wellington. Once the prosciutto is down, the rest is easy sailing. Go ahead and get a solid piece down over there. So we'll just peel off our separator. There we go. Stainless steel French rolling pin that is not tapered. Okay, yes, non-tapered French rolling pins. Oh, okay, so there's the tapered and then there's it's just when there's no handles on it. Those are the French rolling pins. You're right. That would probably be a good idea. I did get a Mozzarella, which is for hand rolling pasta, but I know you're not supposed to use that on anything but pasta. But a long dowel as a rolling pin would be a great idea. Right. And our next piece, get our straight edge here. Lay it down. Peel the paper off. And the prosciutto is definitely starting to warm up. It's getting a lot softer. Starting to kind of get my hands a little bit oily because the fat's starting to melt off. And that's why we try and work as quick as we can with our prosciutto. Oh no, come here. There you go. Over him right there. And we'll just fill in the gaps with the rest of our slices. Then we got one more packet. I'm gonna make this actually twice as high. Make sure that I cover the whole fillet that I have. Put it off right there. And then any little tears, I'm gonna put these guys in to fill the gaps. Now, everything that we're doing right now can be done the day before. So if you're thinking about doing this tomorrow, I know Kim, you were saying you're planning on making a beef Wellington tomorrow. You can do this tonight. You can have everything rolled up, ready to go, and I'll tell you at what point you would start, like the next day. But you'll essentially have a nice little pastry parcel, good to go. And then all you have to do is pull it out of the fridge, score it, egg wash it, and cook it. So food for thought. And usually that's what I'll do if I'm making it for a party. I usually do all the prep work the day before, get everything ready, and then the day of the party, I'll roast it. But that wouldn't be fun on Christmas Eve. Just pulling out a pastry or a roll and being like, all right, guys, here's the Wellington. All right, we're done. All right, cool. There's our first layer. I'm just going to slide this down just a bit. Maybe. There we go. Now we're going to put our second layer there, and then we're going to wrap our meat in that. But before we do that, we're going to put our mushrooms down. Whatever you do, don't let me start rolling out my pastry on top of the prosciutto. Not a good look. You know what? It was easier with the knife. Come here. Go through. And peel this open. And go for layer 2, our extension. Again, if you have a butcher that you like to use or like to go to, you can actually have them cut these out for you or slice it super thin and put these pieces of separator paper all the way across so that you're not dealing with what I'm dealing with. I don't know a very good butcher here, though. So if you live in my area, if you're one of my local people and you know a good butcher, let me know. Always up for a recommendation for a butcher. Had an amazing one when I lived over in Georgia. They were pretty incredible, but hard to find in California. All right. So again, we'll just kind of lay down the uniform edge, the one that's being protected by the paper that peels away really easily. And we'll just kind of fill in this other side as best we can. And we'll peel off this piece of paper. Go. Just going like that. Really, Christina, I find it the opposite. When it comes up to room temperature, it usually starts melting in my hands. For me, usually the colder the better. I actually haven't tried freezing it just because I'm afraid that I'm afraid of what might happen to it. But usually the warmer it gets for me, the more it kind of melts together. But I run pretty warm. My body temperature is pretty warm, so maybe I'm too hot to handle. All right. So our second one for the second layer. Again, we're putting down the flat edge first, the lead edge. We'll just keep going. You'll notice, I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, but my hands are getting super oily from the fat from the prosciutto. There. Now the great thing about this is I can already see that this is going to be tall enough to encompass the entire fillet. And we've got enough for the width too. So I'm happy with how this is turning out. Again, it's just kind of a tedious process to peel all these pieces of prosciutto apart. But we're almost done. Where? Or that piece. Right. You should never play with your food, but talking to your food is okay. Like talking to plants. Actually makes it taste better. Off, and then I do this with the last two pieces. Gotta keep them separated. Okay. Side. That. There. Last bit. There. Peel off a couple of these little extra bits. And then we'll just, there. Eat the bits. Cool. So we've got our prosciutto all flattened out on our parchment, not parchment, our saran wrap, plastic. Yeah, absolutely depressed adult. One of the things that we did, and I'm sorry that you're depressed, but hopefully I can make you feel a little bit better. One of the things that we did was when we cooked down our duxelle down here, we basically put it on a low heat and got it as dry as we possibly could. And you want to pull out as much moisture from this as you can. And our beef, you'll notice that I actually roasted it on like a cookie cooling sheet. All the moisture you can see is actually kind of like rolling around in the bottom of the pan. it let go of a lot of moisture. You really want all of your individual ingredients to get as dry as you can get them without burning them or without scorching them. So that's what we really went for with the duxelle and with the beef. And then when we're gonna cook that, once we get the pastry wrapped around it, we're gonna cook that also elevated so that if anything seeps out, it's gonna go through the pastry and then end up on the bottom of the pan as opposed to making the bottom of the pastry soggy. All right, so here, we got this down. We're basically just gonna take our mushrooms, kind of get them down. Now we're going to spread them out into a thin layer. I like to just kind of go vertically first and spread them out kind of horizontally. Ideally, you'll get enough coverage to spread out over the entire width and length of your beef. If you don't, it really depends on how perfect you want it to look when you cut into it. If you're not super worried about it, you're good. You got enough mushroom in there, you got enough beef in there, you'll be okay. If you want to add a little bit of mushroom, if that's just going to make you feel better, go for it. Generally speaking, that's what I would do. But I don't want to make this cook along last 5 hours. So I will probably just call it a day. Now I'm looking for a nice little knife, or if you have like a pastry spoon or pastry spatula, that works really well. And all I'm really going to do is kind of press down, and that's going to actually kind of spread out all of this duxelle. And you want a nice thin-ish layer. Doesn't have to be super thick. And I'm more interested in the width than I am the height. If I can get it across, I'll be happy. I do want a little bit of an edge at the top end, so that if there's any overlap, the prosciutto will stick together and kind of seal it. Again, I'm just going to kind of take my time with this. Get it spread out as best I can. You can also use a spoon, like the rounded end of a spoon for this. Or a pastry knife if that's what you have. That's one of those knives that kind of comes down and then forward. Helps keep your fingers out of the duxelle when you're doing this. But I really just want to kind of get started here. Then I'll probably switch to a spoon. I'm not fancy enough to have a pastry knife. Probably should. I do a lot of baking. Side. Over to a spoon. The rounded end of the spoon kind of achieves the same thing. I keep my hand kind of high and still have a flattish surface to kind of press all of the duxelle down with. Now, you really just want to make sure that your layer of mushrooms here is uniform. It doesn't have to be any particular thickness. It doesn't have to be super thin. You just want to make sure that it's as uniform across as you can get it. It'll help with even cooking. It'll help with presentation. It'll look better once you cut into your Wellington. And then just try and fill in any little gaps. Sometimes the stuff will stick to the spoon. And just try and get it as wide as your beef at least. There we go. I think we're good here with my duxelle. Probably could have gone with just a little bit more mushrooms, but this will work just fine. Go. All right, now I turned my oven off when I was done cooking the meat, but I'm actually going to go and turn it back on. We're going to get it back up to 450, and that's going to be the temperature that we cook our pastry and everything at. And you definitely want to make sure that it is preheated to that temperature before you get your pastry in there. Go. Thin little layer. And I'm going to clear that window that keeps popping up on my computer out of the way and read the chat again because I can't see it when that pops up. And it never used to do that, so I'm not quite sure why. Decided that that's what it's going to do. Do I add pâté? Why not? What do you mean by pâté? I've never seen anybody add pâté to a Wellington. Usually I just see the duxelle, I see the prosciutto, and then the beef goes in the middle. Is there a layer in there where pate goes? Actually, you know what? Alex, French guy, cooking guy, he added a crepe. So maybe that's where you would put the pate. But no, I've never done that. And I don't have a reason why or why not. I've just never seen it done. So I have not. Good question, though. All right, cool. So we're going to get this spread out nice and thin. Get any of the little extras off of the spoon. Cool. So we've got our prosciutto, we've got our duxelle. It's all pressed down. Make sure that it is kind of compacted down. The lighter and fluffier this is, the more likely it is to kind of fall apart when you cut into it at the end. I want to make sure that everything here is nice and pressed down into a nice flat layer. Again, we're leaving about 1 inch at the top here, just so that when we roll it over, the prosciutto will have something to stick to. And again, that'll just kind of keep it a little bit more condensed and sealed with quotes around it. You're not really sealing anything, but it'll keep it together. That's about what we're gonna get. That duxelle is good. Cool. So we're here at this point. We're gonna go ahead and grab our meat. We're gonna set it down right in the middle at the bottom part. If you got any extra moisture on the meat, go ahead and just kind of tap it off. I'll go ahead and just set it right there. Now, here's where we get to roll our prosciutto around our tenderloin. Smooth liver pate is sometimes listed in the recipe, but I do not know if it's classic or anything like that. Well, the recipe that I'm going on is based off of one of Gordon Ramsay's. When I first got into cooking, he really kind of grabbed my attention and was a really good mentor, even though he wasn't, working with me directly or anything. But he was a good example of what really good food could look like. And so I based a lot of what I did around what he did. And that's where I got the idea to make Beef Wellington in the first place. It looked like a super hard challenge, and it looked like a lot of fun. So none of his recipes use pate, so it's just not something that I've ever done. So I don't know if it's traditional, to be honest with you. So we're gonna go ahead and take our plastic, kind of pick it up, use both of your fingers to just kind of make sure that it's even and level. And we're just gonna kind of roll it around. Now don't worry too much about this getting caught in your beef, because it won't. You roll it 180 degrees like so. There's still, on this side, let me see if I can do that. On this side here, it's still well above where the mushroom is. So what we're gonna wanna do here is kind of grab our beef and kind of tuck it backwards. We're pulling it just back a little bit. We're kind of pressing it into the duxelle and the prosciutto, and we're just making it a nice tight wrap, nice tight roll. Then we're going to pick up the plastic and just kind of gently separate it from the prosciutto and bring it back like so. And now we can actually roll it forward a little bit. Make sure that everything here is nice and tucked in and tight. And now we can do the same thing and pull the plastic out as we need to. And then again, kind of roll it over again. Now see the prosciutto, when the prosciutto here hits the prosciutto here, it's going to start sticking. What we want to do before it does that is just make sure that we've got everything nice and tight. Pull it kind of closed, and then roll it over. Like so. And there we go. Now we've got plastic on plastic, we've got prosciutto on prosciutto, and we've got a nice cylinder of beef. All of this overlap on the sides is fine. Don't worry too much about it. I'm actually going to kind of come over here and just tuck it down just a bit. But I'm not going to cut it or anything. Over here and tuck it down almost like a present. Nice little package of package of yummy goodness. Now, and take this and use the plastic. Just kind of, again, make sure that it's a nice hot cylinder. And then maybe give it 1 or 2 rolls here. Now at this point, we're just going to go across with our knife, continue to wrap, and then we're just going to kind of squeeze as much air out the sides as we can. And then we're going to essentially just twist it once or twice. You don't want to go too tight on this. You want it to stay a cylinder shape, but you don't want to make it look like a football. If you start like really cinching down on the sides, the center is actually going to bulb out because you're putting in too much pressure out on the sides. And you'll actually notice that this twist that I'm doing is kind of cutting the prosciutto on the sides for me. I don't need a knife to do it. The plastic wrap is doing that for me. And there we go. We've got a nice little parcel of Wellington. Now, this is going to go in the fridge while we work on our dough. Now you'll notice that again, it's a nice cylinder. I didn't cinch it down so hard that this started, bulbing out or pressing out in the middle. You want it to be a nice uniform shape and a uniform size. Anything on the side here that's kind of squeezing out, it's fine. Go ahead and squeeze it the rest of the way out. And then I'm just going to set it down on my baking tray for the meat and put that whole thing into the fridge. Like so. And what putting it in the fridge is going to do, just kind of help it firm up a bit. There we are. Interesting, Tigger. I just haven't seen any. Oh, yeah, definitely. Give me a sec. I'm going to load my cousin up with some more snacks. He's sitting in the room with me. He's not able to see, but he's having a great time listening. So let's go ahead, and there are a couple more pistachios. And how are you doing on your drink? I think it'll last. You'll be good. Awesome, awesome. So, continuing on, we don't need our knives anymore, but we do want to pull our dough back over. I'm just going to make sure that there's no mushrooms left on the cutting board. Those in here. Yeah, I've just never seen pate mentioned, honestly, anywhere that I've looked. So that's a very interesting thing. It very likely could be traditional. I just don't have an answer for you on that. I've never made a Wellington with pate. Doggo, stop it. All right, so we've got our dough over here. Had a little bit of time to kind of relax again, so it should be a lot easier to roll out. Now, once you've made that little parcel of meat, essentially, meat and mushrooms, that should rest in the fridge for at least 20 minutes. I'm probably not going to wait that long here on the cook-along. I'm probably just going to barrel along once my dough is ready. However, if you have the time, let it rest. And if you don't have the time, you'll notice that it's not a huge deal if you don't let it rest. But the longer you let it rest, the more the flavors have to kind of marry together and kind of, round themselves out, I guess. And the more it's going to hold its shape. So again, we're just kind of rolling this out. I've got my hands on the actual rolling pin on the outside corners. And I'm just rolling it until it's a little bit longer. Then I'm spinning it 90 degrees and rolling it this way. Awesome, man. Or woman. Or non-binary person. just a force of habit that I say, man. Now we're gonna roll this out until it's about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick. If you're not into inches, maybe 3 millimeters thick. Pretty thin. You don't want it to be too thin, but you don't want it to be very thick either. This isn't a puff pastry, it's just a nice pâté brisé. So I guess there is pâté in this, but it's not the pâté that you're talking about. Just a really, really buttery dough. We do want it to be thin. Too thin and it won't bake up the way we want it to, and too thick and you're just gonna have like a loaf of bread around your meat, which, I mean, sure, if that's what you're interested in or that's what you're into, go for it, but not really what I'm looking for. If your dough cracks apart, go ahead and just kind of press it back together the best you can. You might hear my dog in the background. I believe we have some guests showing up next door, and he is very concerned that they might be here to steal the Wellington. You guys have any pets? And what are you doing with them for Christmas? Hey, stop it, calm down. Now again, I'm just trying to make this as big as my little roll over there, my little Wellington roll. And I think it's got the width. Just wanted to make sure that I got the height as well. There we go, 90 degrees. A little bit of flour here. There we go. And then what are your guys' plans for Christmas Day? I'm going over to my mom's house. She's gonna have some homemade ravioli. And then we're just gonna spend the day there. It'll be a pretty chill, pretty awesome day. Go. And yeah, we're just closing out the year with a bang here on Cook Along Live. This is the last Cook Along of this year. This Sunday I will not be cooking since I'm cooking it today. And the next one will be the following Sunday, which I believe is the 3rd or the 2nd. I think it's the 3rd of January. So that'll be next year. 2021. I hope everybody who's watching, we had a really interesting year for sure. Hopefully nobody was affected too much. I mean, I know a lot of people were affected, but hopefully nobody was affected too badly. And hopefully these cook-alongs have been useful. Episode 40 today, so we've been doing this for 40 weeks, which is pretty incredible. Actually, technically, this would be 41, but I condensed it into 2 since last week we made our dough and prepped our beef. I'm gonna go ahead and press this together a little bit. Press this one together as well. Yep, remote video is always an option. That's essentially my job. I'm a trainer for a real estate company. We do a lot of tech stuff. And so most of my days are sitting on Zoom calls, either training people on how to use our technology, which I absolutely love doing. And I love working with all the agents that I work with. Or I'm on other meetings, either supervising or just learning more for myself. So Zoom is kind of become the de facto communication method of this year. Cool, so I've got our pastry rolled out. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of press some of these sides together just a little bit more. And we're gonna get our beef placed and get it wrapped. So again, I would put this in the fridge for at least 20 minutes if you have the time, and more than likely like up to an hour or two, and then get your dough out and roll it out. But I'm not gonna follow my own advice today. We're just gonna barrel ahead. Oh, let me get my oven on. 450. Perfect. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of place my beef while it's still in the plastic because it's not going to get any of the dough wet. None of the prosciutto is gonna stick, none of that's gonna happen. So I'm just gonna kind of figure out where I want it. And what I'm gonna do is also kind of figure out which side I wanna be the top and which side I wanna be the bottom. So I think I'm going to go ahead, just make this the top part, and I'm just gonna set my beef right around in the middle right here. I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to cut up from the bottom to remove the plastic bit. Same thing on this side, cut up from the bottom to remove the plastic bit. And then at this point, I can start unrolling my cellophane once I find where the edge was, or once I just start tearing it, either way. And what I'm going to try and do is unroll it so that it ends up right where I want it to be on the pastry. So like that. This is a nice flat bottom here. That's what I'm going to keep as the bottom. We'll leave it like so. A couple of these little pieces of fat came off. Get rid of those guys. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lift my pastry up. Just make sure it goes over, which it does. And this is going to be the bottom of our Wellington, so the fact that there's a seam here is okay. Now I'm going to pick this up and just make sure that it goes up. And it does, so that's perfect. So what I'm going to do, give this a little bit of an overlap. I'm going to give this just a little bit of an overlap. And I'm going to say that I'm actually going to remove about that much of my pastry. And I'm just going to cut that across. Like so. I'll set that aside just in case we need it. And I'm also just going to square up this one. I'm just scoring it so that I can see where I want to make my cut. I'm not trying to cut through it on the meat. Cool, so that's all good. Next up, we need a way for that pastry to kind of stick to itself. The fact that it is floured means that it's not really going to want to adhere. It's not wet enough. It doesn't really want to homogenize with itself. So we're going to make a little bit of egg wash. Now in order to do that, we're going to need an egg or two. I'm going to grab 2. And just a little bit of water. And I actually just want the yolk. Get rid of the white. Yolk in there. Same thing with this bad boy. Get rid of the white. Just get the yolk in there. We'll add just a little bit of water and rinse our hands off. I'm gonna say, I don't know, maybe a tablespoon of water. Really not that much. And then you can either use this or you can use a fork or like a little whisk if you have one. And we're just going to beat the eggs together with the water. Until they're nice and mixed. And then grab our brush. And while it's still mostly dry, I gave it a nice rinse after we used it for the Dijon. I'm just going to let it kind of dry out by brushing my cutting board. I'm going to go ahead and clear off my dough. Any extra flour, any extra mushrooms. I clean it off as best I can. Now, we're going to fold this side up first, and then we're going to fold this side down over it. So this is the side that's going to get the egg wash on it. We're going to get this side, and we're going to come down the sides as well. So let's get started with that. Before I do that, I am going to put a little bit of egg wash in these little cracks, like so. Because what it's going to do is actually kind of help the dough to stick together. And I'm going to have to probably put my dog in my room. He's getting a little excited over nothing. There we go. Use your finger to just kind of glue those guys shut. We'll just flip this up and over, like so. Try and pull it as taut as you can without breaking your prosciutto. There we go. Now, top part, first thing we're going to do again is just kind of glue these guys together. Bezic, quiet. Stop it. Stop. Please, stop. I don't want to put you in the back room, but I will. I'm going to get these guys glued together. And then what we're going to do here, we've got our one piece kind of rolled up over and it's nice and taut. This side here, we're going to take our egg wash. You don't want a lot of it, but we're going to go ahead and just kind of paint the edge here. And what we're going to do by painting it, make sure you remove any little bits of your brush if they come off. We're going to paint it for a little while. We actually want to work some of the starch from the flour, from the dough, into the egg to make it even more sticky. Now, again, I was talking about the Chef Steps guys earlier. I was watching one of their videos on making a Wellington, and they were saying, or I guess he was saying that, you know how they have super glue, and they say, you know, kind of leave it apart for a couple minutes until it becomes tacky, then stick it together. That's what this is doing. You're mixing starch in with the egg. You're essentially making it a nice little glue. And then when you put it together, it's going to really stick and stay in one piece and stay together. Give me just a sec and I'll catch up on some of that chat. Good German beer. Ooh, absolutely. I am cooking this for right now. So this is going to be served once it's done. It's for tonight, Christmas Eve dinner. Great question. So I'm going to let this kind of sit for maybe a minute or two until it gets a little bit tacky, and then we're going to roll it over. Skype drinking, absolutely. Absolutely. Christmas in Germany, awesome, man. I've actually been to Munich, and then I did a half Ironman in Zell am See in Austria. That was a lot of fun. I can pet my dog on camera, but I'm not going to because then I'd have to wash my hands a bunch of times. Then in millimeters, I would say probably 3 millimeters. 3 millimeters or so, yeah. Perfect, I think I caught up there. Yeah, dog is definitely doing a walk by, but he's also barking at every little noise that's outside, which is kind of annoying. Ooh, blackberry porter sounds amazing. I actually was at Erdinger, the Erdinger brewery, for Oktoberfest. Like, I think it was we were there 2 weeks before Oktoberfest, and then the day that I was leaving was like the weekend that Oktoberfest was starting. So unfortunately, I missed Oktoberfest that year. However, I did get some really good Oktoberfest beer. Cool. So we're gonna go ahead and again pull these together. Make sure that it's nice and taut, and then just get these guys kind of stuck together. And this is fine. All this little craggy bits, they're okay because it's on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and roll it over. If you want, you can notice that I have a couple of little holes here. I put a little bit of egg wash in there and see if I can kind of stick them together just a little bit, but I'm not going to worry too much about it because, again, it's the bottom of the pastry, the bottom of the Wellington, so I'm not too worried about it. We'll roll it over like so. Now we've got our top. We'll pick it up and move it over. Now, we've got our piece of beef, and it comes into about right here. What we're going to do with it... Hey, come here. Come here. Come on, back. Nope, nope, nope. You're going backwards. In there. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Go. Now you think about all that noise you're making. Yep, you can bark all you want. All right, sorry about that. We got all of this dough here. That's actually a little bit too much. We're going to go ahead and just fold it over and just make sure that we're getting it nice and tight up along the edge of our Wellington. And we're going to press it down and then just make sure to flatten it. Give yourself about 1 inch or 2 of excess and then just cut that dough off. Same thing on this side. Use the back of your knife, kind of flatten the dough up against the beef. And then if you can give yourself another couple of inches, I'm getting pretty tight on this side. Give yourself a little bit of overflow. And then there we go. Now, what we're going to do with this side is just kind of fold it up and under. And there's no science to this. Just do the best you can. Fold it up and under like so. And then the same thing on this side. We're going to pick it up, just fold it up and under like so. And there we go. Our nice hot pastry for a beef Wellington. Now, almost done. Now, I'm almost afraid to look at the chat because I'm sure you guys are all very upset that I moved my dog into the back room. However, he's been a little bit of a pill today, so it's well deserved. But let's go take a look. Puppy wants the prosciutto. Yes, he absolutely does. Finished one in the oven. Nope, I don't play that game. I actually, part of the reason that I do this cook along live is because I want everything to happen in real time. I don't want to do the, hey, look at this. We've got a full cooked one in the oven ready to go. Not the point. You'll notice the bottom doesn't look all that great. Fine, doesn't matter. You're not going to see it. We are going to kind of paint a little bit of egg wash in here, and again, try and glue things together. Make sure that things stay shut. And the more you can brush it into the dough, the more tacky and gluey it will get. And then you can just kind of brush it together like that. And same thing on this side. Get just a little bit underneath here. Now we'll flip it back over. Now, there are a lot of places that will cut out one of those dough lattices and then put the dough lattice over the Wellington. That's just a bit too much work for me. I know if you have a dough cutter that already has that lattice pattern, it's not that big of a deal. I don't, and I don't expect anybody to buy one. We're still going to have a pretty nice design on the outside of our Wellington. This is going to be a little bit more simple, a little bit more rustic, but works just as well. Before we actually etch our pattern on here, though, we are going to egg wash it. And what I'm going to do with the egg wash is I'm actually going to get it set up on my roasting tray first, like so. Hey man, no worries, you have a great Christmas. I hope everything is going okay. If you need to reach out to anybody, feel free to send me an email. I'm sure you can find it. I think it's in my YouTube bio. You can go take a look. We're going to go ahead and get our eggs beaten back together, and we're going to give our Wellington a nice exterior egg wash here. Doesn't have to be too thick. Again, we just want to get a nice coating. This is going to help with browning. This is also going to help with kind of puffing it up, and it'll help you see where your pattern is. Go. Yeah, no treats for Fezzik, Mom. Absolutely not. Not tonight. He's being a little jerk. There we go. Just gonna make sure that we get the entire exterior. Not gonna worry too much about the bottom. Again, you're not gonna see it, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I am gonna make sure to get all the corners and the edges on the outsides here. And then the easiest way is just to rotate the tray that it's on, as opposed to trying to like reach out around the other side or anything like that. Just rotate the baking tray. Nice thin layer of egg wash. Once you've egg washed this, you really shouldn't touch it again, because it's just going to be a very sticky mess. So we'll get this all painted up and ready to go. All right, so in order to score this, let me see. I like to use a paring knife. And what I'll do is I'll use the back of the knife. So instead of using the sharp end over here, I'll actually use the dull end over here. And I'll use the dull end just to score from the bottom of one side right across the middle, using the tip down to the other side. And then maybe even come up from the other side just to make sure that I get it all the way down. Just like that. You're not going through. You just want this to be like you're etching into the dough, essentially. And then from here, using that as kind of a, I don't know, baseline or whatever, I'm just going to draw a couple of arcs coming down the side of the dough. Like so. Again, we're not going very deep into the dough. We are just arcing down from this essentially backbone or spine and kind of curving around the exterior. You absolutely don't have to do this if you're not into doing the artistic stuff. You just want to eat a lovely Wellington. Go ahead and throw it in the oven after you've egg washed it. But I think this looks kind of fun. And it lets you put a little bit of an artistic spin on it. There we go. And then on this side, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go actually in the opposite direction. So we'll get kind of a little wavy pattern. You want to try and keep these about evenly spaced. I'm trying to go for about 1/4 of an inch, or I guess a centimeter, for those of you who are not in the States. And again, I'm using the back of my knife to kind of score it, like so. There we go. So this goes in the oven. If you want, if you have some flaky salt, you can put a little bit of flaky salt on the top of it. Malden salt here in the States, and just adds a little bit of a touch. I don't have any, so I'm not actually going to do that. But this is going into the oven for 30 minutes at 450. Hey Siri, set a timer for 30 minutes. I'm actually going to turn down my timer on my thing too. Make it 33 minutes. Cool. So that's the Wellington. The Wellington is cooking. Now we're just waiting 30 minutes until that's done. While we're waiting, I'm sure, since it is Christmas season, that many of you are planning on doing some kind of dessert. I actually don't have any desserts planned. However, I do believe we are having something for dessert, but I don't know what it is. But one of the things that a lot of people usually just kind of buy in is whipped cream. And I don't know why, because whipped cream is so easy to do yourself. It's actually going to take us probably less than a half an hour that I need to fill. But it's a pretty simple process. A lot of people get really kind of scared off by it because it's a manual. I mean, you can use a mixer if you want, but it's just as easy to just grab a whisk and do it yourself. Most people are afraid of just, you know, doing the circular whisking for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but you don't really have to do that. You can actually just go back and forth and it works just as good and it's just as easy. And you don't have to do it continuously. You can actually stop and take breaks without ruining the whipped cream. The ingredients for it are also pretty simple. You're just going to get some heavy whipping cream, what's the other? Yeah, there's another word for it, or another way that you can call it. But heavy whipping cream, double cream. I think that's the word for it. Just pour it into a bowl. Grab a whisk. I like to use a fairly medium-sized balloon whisk, but if you have a large balloon whisk, this actually goes faster. And all you're going to do is either make little circles like so in the bowl, or you can just go back and forth in the bowl. And you'll notice that I'm not going very fast. I'm not being super vigorous about it. But what will end up happening, and what I usually do is I'll alternate between making circles and going back and forth. This will aerate the cream until it essentially forms stiff peaks. It'll go from this to soft peaks to stiff peaks. And then you just add sugar. Takes a little bit of time, but really not that much, and it's cheaper and way tastier than the canned stuff that you get, which is always a little bit too dry, funnily enough. Awesome, awesome, Mom. You have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow. Yes, Felicia, absolutely looks like a giant burrito. It will no longer look like a burrito when we cut into it. So here we are. You'll notice that the milk or the cream is already starting to thicken up. I hope you guys can see that on camera. But I'm really not going that hard. Like, you can just kind of just do this while you're talking to friends or do this while you're talking to family. And you'll end up with a really nice whipped cream. You'll also notice that I'm not holding my whisk from the top like so and stirring. I'm actually holding it as if I'm going to point at somebody. And I'm using that. It just makes it a little bit easier. If you're trying to stir like a witch, it just doesn't work. Not quite sure how the witches got their brew done, holding their handles vertically. But you'll notice the milk is thickening up quite nicely. The cream is thickening up quite nicely. The other thing that you'll need when you're making whipped cream, instead of using granulated sugar, use confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar, if it's called that where you are. It dissolves a lot nicer into the cream and doesn't give you a, like, it won't make it gritty. If you use granulated sugar, the cream will tend to be a little bit gritty. Now you can definitely do this with a stand mixer, but why would you want to get that all dirty and have to worry about going and grabbing all that equipment and pulling it out? Plus, every time I do it with a stand mixer, I tend to leave the stand mixer going for a little too long without checking it, because I'll try and do other things, and then I'll end up over mixing the cream. So again, I'm just alternating between kind of going in circles and going back and forth. And the cream is already starting to get to the soft peak stage, just actually like right before it. And it's actually growing in size. The volume has, I wouldn't say doubled, but maybe gotten half again as big. And I don't know if you guys can see it on camera, but it's looking like almost shaving cream at this point. You can see that now I'm actually getting it to stick on the sides. It's becoming thicker. And of course I can take a break and, you know, wait a couple minutes and then go right back to it. Now, the secret behind whipped cream is keeping it cold. The warmer it gets, the quicker it's going to turn into cream again instead of staying whipped. You'll notice that here we are. We're getting to the soft peak stage where it's actually starting to form on the whisk, but it's not holding its shape quite yet. So we're just going to go a little bit longer until we get to what we call the stiff peak stage, which is where it'll just look like a mountaintop, where you can kind of scoop it out and it'll hold its shape like that. Now, again, this is totally unsweetened cream, so it's just going to taste like cream. It's just going to taste like milk, essentially. If you want to sweeten it, just grab some confectioner sugar, or powdered sugar, if that's what it's called where you are. And just add a teaspoon at a time until it gets to the desired sweetness. Here we go. We'll just actually switch over to this camera right here. Got my confectioner sugar. I'll just grab a little spoon here. And I know that 2 will be about good for me. And now we've gotten our cream to the stiff peak stage, and that camera does have a really good that. You might be able to see that this has a pretty good stiff peak stage. So we don't really want to whip it all that much more. We just want to gently incorporate the sugar in. So we're not going to whisk it anymore. Now we're just going to stir. You can actually switch to a spoon or a spatula if you want, just to make sure that you're not incorporating any more air into your cream. And there we go. A beautiful whipped cream. Just sweet enough. Now this I'm going to put directly into my fridge and let it sit there. But of course I'm going to clean the whisk the old-fashioned way. Set that there. And then, I love homemade whipped cream. So, let's switch back over to here. And, I'm not sure, can you guys see into there from that camera? I guess you can. I can also pick it up and move it over. Give you guys a little bit of a closer look at the Wellington. I gotta clean that glass, don't I? There we go. You can see the coloring on the outside is already starting. So that guy is gonna be nice and cooked. I'll just jump back over here. Have a nice little conversation. So, as we kind of come to the end of the year, I guess I just kind of want to thank everybody who's supported me in these cook-alongs. I know some of you are new and have not seen me do these before, but I've got 41 episodes in the bag. And I started this back in March when we basically first went into shelter in place here in California. And it was a way to kind of keep friends and family connected, friends and family that I would generally have over and entertain. And I started with one of my favorite things to cook, which is tacos, Taco Tuesday. All of those old videos can be found on my YouTube channel. So I see that Christina says that YouTube keeps blacking out. I'm not sure if that's just you or if that's a widespread thing. And yes, pumpkin spice is delicious as well. It's one of my guilty pleasures, I guess. But yeah, guys, it's been an awesome journey, kind of figuring out how to do this, figuring out what I wanted the style and what I wanted the tone to be of these cook-alongs. It's been great with all of you all there. and kind of helping me decide some of the dishes that you wanted to see. And speaking of which, you know, this is the last Cook Along Live of 2020. What a year it's been. Can't wait to get into 2021, and hopefully it gets better from here. However, what would you like to see next year? What are some of the things that you would think would be able to be done in, you know, the span of a couple of hours that would be interesting to you? Beef Wellington was a huge request right at the beginning. People wanted to see this, and I wanted to save it for something special. And I also wanted to kind of figure out if there was a way to do it with a pastry, with a dough, all of the steps, making sure that it wasn't going to be like a 7 or 8 hour cook along. I mentioned earlier in the show that the pastry that we're using is not puff pastry. And the reason for that is puff pastry is a very technical thing to make. You're essentially layering butter and dough, and you end up with 190 something layers of flour and dough. It's not a very involved process, but it's a very tedious process. It takes a lot of time to do it, and it's not active time. It's literally like roll it out, fold it on itself, roll it out, put it in the fridge, and wait for 30 minutes. That's not something that I wanted to even attempt to try and translate into a cook-along format, because I don't think there's a way to do that. There are a ton of videos on the internet that actually go through and put something like that together. That being said, these are all cook-along lives. Do you guys think it would be a good idea to maybe keep this series going, or turn it into something else where I do put together edited versions of dishes that might take a little bit longer, and it might just be an hour video, or it might be a 30-minute video, and it loses a little bit of the context. It would essentially be, you know, another cooking show. However, it would allow me to kind of branch out a little bit. Or do you like the format that we did kind of at Thanksgiving and that we did for this show, where it's a longer form cook along, and anything that needs to happen before, like prep work, we take care of in maybe 1 or 2 episodes leading up to it? Is that something that might be interesting to you? So I'm just kind of curious. I would love your feedback on that. What would make this a better experience for everybody? Ooh, Christina, I've already done shepherd's pie. Baked ziti and bulgogi is a good one. Spaghetti pie, I've never done that. That would be awesome. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Kim. Ooh, popovers, that's another good one. Popovers are puff pastry, though, aren't they? Thinking about that. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Ooh, Puerto Rican rice with chicken. Ooh, I could also do paella. That's another one that I wanna do. And getting that nice crispy crust on the bottom is something that I know is a challenge. I've actually never done paella. The other two things that I've never, I did a cioppino style risotto, which kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. And that was actually before I thought that this was going to be a long-term thing. I was just like, I'll just do 2 of my favorite things in one dish. And it worked out well. I mean, that was a really tasty dish. I think it was early on in the series. But I'm curious, would you guys want to go more back to kind of basics and just do a basic mushroom risotto and do a cioppino from scratch? We actually, my stepmom and I put together a cioppino. She actually made the cioppino, but I made a real quick fish stock that went with it. And it was kind of like spur of the moment. I almost made like a dashi and used that for the base for the cioppino, and it was amazing. Would that be something that would be interesting? Just kind of revisiting some of the videos from the past, if they've been kind of mashups. I'm just kind of trying to obviously make this something that you guys, it's going to be valuable to you. I know, Kim, you said that you are enjoying the series the way that it is. I have a lot of fun producing it the way that it is. However, I just want to make sure that, you know, it's something that people are enjoying. Ooh, jambalaya. We did jambalaya. I think we did jambalaya. Egg rolls would be difficult. Pork fried rice. Fried rice I'm afraid of, because I don't want to become one of... I want to make sure I do it right so that Uncle Roger doesn't roast me. Thai dishes. We did a yellow curry. We have already done Thai yellow curry, and that was a lot of fun. We made the paste from scratch. I still have some of the paste in an airtight container and use it to make the yellow curry. Tadig I've never had, so I don't know what that is, but I'll definitely look it up. Thank you for all these suggestions. I'm going to come through and look through these, and it'll help me build next year's cook-along schedule. Now, the other thing that I was thinking is, would it be interesting, or might it be a good idea to do cook-along lives maybe once a month and do these on a weekend, and then have just other produced videos for particular dishes where, you know, it's going to be a 20 or 30-minute video more regularly, like maybe those would be once a week, and then that would culminate in a cook-along live at the end of the month. I love doing the live cooking, so I'm not trying to not do the live cooking. I'm just curious if that would be more palatable or not. Ooh, condiments. Yes, we could do like a mayonnaise. That would be fun. I know that a couple people wanted to see how you sharpen knives. And I do all of my own knife sharpening on whetstones and stuff like that. So that was something I was thinking about. And I don't know that that would be great for a cook-along. It might be good for like a midweek, you know, hey, here's just a quick live stream on how to do this, which is not necessarily cooking, but is related to cooking. Also, hopefully next year I'm going to be able to do more flying. This year's been really weird with, you know, all the pandemic stuff going on. I've been working towards my instrument rating slowly, and I'm taking a lot of precaution in just making sure the aircraft. I assume a lot of you guys know me from my aviation vlogging, and a lot of you guys know me from my flight simulator stuff. And I know that some of you guys are not super interested in the cooking aspect of stuff, but I am planning on getting back into the flight vlog stuff. Just it's difficult this year, especially with all that's going on, to, number one, schedule enough time in the plane so that I can basically give it a once-over before I go flying, make sure that it's clean, make sure it's sterilized, and then also do the same thing when I'm done, because I want to leave the plane in a good condition for the next person, just in case they're not taking any precaution. But yeah, those are all things that I'm working on for next year as far as my video production, my YouTube channel. Again, I'm super thankful for all of you guys and gals, and as Kenji Lopez Alt would say, non-binary pals, for supporting me and cooking along with me and getting value out of this. I'm super happy that I'm able to provide value for you, and I just want to make sure that the channel stays something that you guys want to watch. So thank you so much. Stuffed cabbage. Ooh, no, but I've done stuffed grape leaves. That's something that's big in Armenian and Greek culture, is dolma or sarma, depends on who you ask. Party apps. You know, another thing I was thinking of, have you guys all watched Hot Ones? That interview show with Hot Wings? I generally get all of their sauces, and I really love them. They're super tasty. The only one I haven't tried is the bomb, and I don't think I ever want to try that one. I have a couple of ideas that would play on that same kind of format. I'm curious if that would be interesting to anybody. Potato pancakes would be fun. And I'm sorry, guys, I am just wasting time because I don't have another dish to make while we're waiting on the Wellington to come out. This is one of the drawbacks to doing something live and not having something in the oven ready to pull out. However, again, that's kind of the point of this series, is not having any sleight of hand where it's like, oh yeah, cool, we've already got this lasagna ready to go. And I was thinking about another side dish to do. The whipped cream was, of course, the first thing that came to mind. And since we're having a lot of family over, they're kind of taking care of all the other side dishes, and I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. And I couldn't really think of anything else to do. My stepmom is making scalloped potatoes. I was going to just do some mashed potatoes, but then that would kind of clash with that. So there's a couple of things that were possibly going to happen, and then I just decided it would be more fun to kind of have a chat along with you. So party appetizers would be fun. White borscht. I've never had borscht. Another thing I need to do. Yeah, there's a lot that I haven't actually tried. So all of these are great suggestions. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to go through and look at those. What are your guys' plans for New Year's? And you sounded like you were about to say something, Armin. Indian food. Oh, I could do Indian food. We have done chicken tikka masala, but I guess that's more British food. That's not real, like, that really Indian food? Be interested to hear from an actual Indian person to let me know if they consider that Indian food or not. For me, New Year's, I'm probably gonna just chill at home, play some video games. Absolutely, Tigger. Yep, 100%. That's pretty much. Depending on the weather. If the weather is good, I'm gonna see if I can. And if San Francisco is doing a fireworks show, last year I went out and actually filmed the fireworks from a plane when I was flying, and I want to do that again this year. However, if the weather's not good, or if San Francisco cancels all the party stuff because pandemic. It wouldn't make any sense. So we'll see. If that doesn't happen, it'll probably be cooking at home and then watching a movie and falling asleep at 11:30, 100%. What is pakora? Explain that. I've never even heard of that. Drawn butter. I don't know how to draw butter. You mean like clarify butter? Sorrel borscht. Okay. And leave out the egg. Perfect. And yes, champagne is a staple. Hey Siri, how much time is left on the timer? All right, it's not bad. Go take a quick look at our Wellington in here, our dirty oven. My stepmom is probably having an aneurysm because my oven is dirty. It looks really good. Yes, sir. Go ahead and take a quick peek. Definitely seeing a lot more browning. You'll also notice that I'm doing something that I almost never do, which is open the oven before the food is done. But I definitely want to give you guys a peek at this. Plus, this little guy heats up real quick, so part of the reason I like using him. Wellington is almost done. We've got about 7 minutes, and we'll get started. Deep fried Indian appetizer. Okay. Like the tempura stuff that they do? Thank you for that link, Felicia. And make it with cabbage, not sorrel. Okay, got it. Clarified butter. I actually don't know how to clarify butter either. I know you melt it and then you just pull out the milk fat, but I would probably want to look up how to do it properly before just trying to do it. As far as doing butter, though, the big mistake that I make, or that I see other people make, is when they're trying to clarify butter, or not clarify butter, when they're trying to melt butter, they either use a microwave, which I don't like, or they'll bring it out of the fridge and then immediately put it on too high heat, and it'll actually burn the butter a little bit. The trick with melting butter is like the lowest heat you can do, and preferably having the butter at room temperature before you start. Then it melts uniformly, it melts quickly. I mean, apart from letting it come to room temperature and waiting on that time, but having butter at room temperature or planning ahead a little bit usually makes the process a lot easier. Ah, that's an interesting one. No veggies with colors, because that was used for vodka. I would think that they would use the non-colored vegetables for vodka because vodka's clear. But I don't distill spirits, so I don't know. It's actually a really cool little tidbit. And actually, my stepmom, Cindy, grew up, well, she's Ukrainian, of Ukrainian descent. Let me grab my dog now, since I think he's had a timeout long enough. Hi. Oh, now you got your little doggy asthma. Poor puppy. Hi, are you going to be a good boy? Come here. Let's say hi to the internet. Well, this is my dog. Puppy! His name is Fezzik. He's named after Andre the Giant's character in The Princess Bride, if you've ever seen that. One of my favorite movies. We have two cats, or had two cats. One was named Wesley, and one is named Buttercup. Wesley, sadly, is no longer with us, and Buttercup is somewhere in here. But since my cousin's here, there's another person in the house, so she's probably hiding under my bed. Named all of them after the characters from The Princess Bride, and naturally the dog is the smallest animal, so we named him after the biggest character in the movie. Yeah, she's pretty cool. Don't let her know that I said that. Oh wait, she's watching, isn't she? Oh no. But yes. Okay. Oh, forgot. Let me top up my cousin with his drink of choice. Sometimes I get to talking and I forget what I'm doing. There you are. And he drinks beautiful Don Julio 1942. If you like tequila, it is a fantastic tequila. For some reason, I never acquired a taste for tequila. I like pretty much everything else. But I'm not quite sure what it is about tequila I don't like. I'm more of a whiskey person. So I will join you. I drink well, I've got some bourbon, I've got some scotch, I've got some rye whiskey. No. It's Lagavulin, or got some Bullet bourbon, which is not scotch, but yep, 16 years. I think I'm gonna do this Balvenie Caribbean cask, my favorite. Nice sweet whiskey. Chicken and waffles. That is great suggestion. There we go. Would you like a taster of whiskey?
Yeah.
So this is the Balvenie. It's aged in rum casks, rum barrels. It's to the left of your tequila. I'm sorry, it's to the right of your tequila. Yep. And it is a scotch because it's from Scotland. Aged 14 years, extra matured in rum casks. This is the first whiskey that I ever had that was one that I enjoyed. Just because it's not super peaty. It's like a nice smooth kind of sweet, almost fruity whiskey. Yeah, you can absolutely smell it if you just kind of take a nice little waft. Hey Siri, how much time is left on the timer? Cool, we've got about a minute left. So I'm just gonna fill the rest of the minute by saying cheers to you, all of my viewers for the past year. And thanks again for all that you do for me so that I can continue to create stuff that is awesome for you, because I have a blast putting these together. This is the highlight of my week. Well, one of the highlights of my week, but definitely up there in the top half of the things that I enjoy. That's a good one. Yum, yum. And I think it's amazing that I have viewers from all around the world who enjoy watching this. And I have friends who, while they might not cook along live with me, do, like Kim, plan on, using these to help actually put together dishes in the future. I have, hey Siri, stop the timer. A really good friend of mine in Australia who has done several of my dishes, like, well after the fact, but he's given me nothing but positive feedback on how it's helped him show off for his friends. What berries do I like to macerate? I love to do strawberries and sometimes raspberries, but the raspberries, it's usually with cheesecake. And that's what I'll do macerated, but I won't. You know what? Marionberries or blackberries or huckleberries would be delicious. Thinking about it, I've never done it, but I think that those would be amazing. All right, let's grab our Wellington. Grab pot holder. Let's grab both pot holders. And this looks awesome. So, there we go. Beautiful beef Wellington. Let's go ahead and do that. You guys can see it from that angle. You'll notice that all the little scores that we made in the beef kind of translate into these nice little design lines on the outside. You can absolutely put, like, you know, a lattice work bit of dough on the outside if that's something that you want to do. Honestly, I think that that's a little bit too much work when you're doing this much work already. If you're really trying to show off, cool. And if you already have a pastry lattice cutter, cool. I didn't, and didn't expect anybody else to, so I didn't want to do that and be like, well, yours isn't going to look as good as mine. Plus, that's the only thing that I would ever use it for, would be a beef Wellington. I can't imagine doing lattice for very much else. Then again, I don't do pastry that much. When I do baking, it's usually cake. I don't do very many pastries or pies, so I may be wrong. Maybe in the future I'll end up getting one of those, but not at the moment. So now, one of the things you got to be careful with is, as it was mentioned, the bottom is probably going to be a little bit wet, just because of any extra moisture from your meat, from your duxelle, the mushrooms that we had in there. So just be careful when you're kind of separating this from the pan or from the cooling tray, the cooling rack. Be gentle with it and kind of slowly work it up. If you just grab it and yank, you're probably going to peel the bottom off of your Wellington, and that's not what you're looking to do. There you go. Even with that, you'll notice that some of the dough is left behind. However, no one is going to see the bottom of your Wellington, so you're just going to set that aside and pretend like it doesn't exist, because we can. All right, so here's our beautiful Wellington. This is hot, very hot. We're going to let it kind of chill and cool for just a bit. Grab a bread knife, carve this. You do not want to carve this with just a regular flat knife, because you'll actually end up kind of smashing the pastry as opposed to carving through it. The serrated edges of a bread knife go through it just a little bit easier. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it on this screen. Pick this way up. Right there. Cool. You guys can see that pretty well. Now, remember that the meat actually ends right about here. So that's where our first cut is going to be, but just a little bit behind it. That's going to take any of the excess, I'm sorry, we're going to cut right along it because we want to have that edge, but we don't want all of the extra prosciutto and the extra pastry and everything that's kind of like making this end kind of bulbous coming with it. So what we want to do is just kind of cut right behind where the meat's going to be, and then that'll give us a nice clean edge of meat, and then we can cut our next slice from there. Don't start in the middle. You absolutely can if you want. However, it's going to make it more difficult to portion it out, in my opinion. I like to start on the end and then cut it like almost like a loaf of bread. Also notice that this is a nice, since we didn't cinch down our edges and make this kind of like, you know, bow out in the middle, it's a nice uniform log, if you will, of pastry with everything inside of it. So I'm going to start on this side over here, just because then I can work backwards. And we're going to go with about right. I'm going to start here. I'm going to cut right. You know what? Hot. I'm just going to do this so I don't burn myself. There we go. So there's mushroom, a little bit of meat right there, so that actually is probably a pretty perfect cut. Then I'm going to cut about an inch back. Careful with it. we go. Maybe just a little bit overcooked on the edge, but the rest of the meat looks great. If we turn it this way, everything is delicious inside. And then really it's just cutting them all about the same thickness. You are going to have a little bit of moisture. There's just no way around that. However, the difference between a beef that's just falling apart because it's, you know, soggy versus a Wellington that is not is usually how much you cook everything down beforehand, just to make sure that you remove as much moisture as you can. Yikes. Go. And that is a beef Wellington. Done. Again, I would let this sit for maybe 15-20 minutes, let it kind of relax. Since I'm cutting it fresh out of the oven, it's more prone to cracking and more prone to kind of being more, being brittle. Letting it kind of relax will help it just be a little bit easier to carve. So I rushed into it so that I could have something to show and, cut into it and be like, hey, here you go, and not have you wait around for an extra 20 minutes. However, if you have the time, kind of be patient, let it rest, do whatever other side dishes you're doing, and then carve into it, and you'll have a lot better luck. You'll also be able to just kind of hold onto it with your fingers instead of having to use a towel, because it's not going to be ridiculously warm, or liquid magma hot is actually more accurate. And here's how you would basically get your beef Wellington done. I'm going to go ahead and slide this over to the side, let you sit, and grab a plate just to do a presentation of one of these bad boys. And that is your beef Wellington done. And I'll just use my knife, slide right under all the way. And we'll just go ahead and set it on the plate like so. And then any other sides that you have, you could adorn the plate like so. But here's your beef Wellington. Done. All right, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holiday. Happy New Year. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that I got that across in this video. I know I talked about it enough. But hopefully you guys give this a try. If not tomorrow, I know Kim is. Good luck. Please take a picture and send it to me, Kim. But let me know. Let me know. Macerated is essentially just diced down and then mixed with sugar so that it releases all of its juices and becomes super gooey and yummy and delicious. That's what macerated is. Anyway, everybody, I hope you guys have a fantastic New Year. If you want to see any of the 41 episodes of Cook Along Live that we've produced this year, or that I've produced this year, please go check out my YouTube channel. All the recordings are there, youtube.com/PSYRIXX. That is Cyrix. You can find me anywhere on the internet under that handle, almost anywhere on the internet. I think there's one place where somebody, it's probably even me, registered it and doesn't actually post anything there, so it's probably me. But yeah, by all means, go like, subscribe. You can find all the ingredients for this posted ahead of time on Instagram, instagram.com/Cyrix. I put together some smaller cut down versions of these videos for TikTok and Instagram stories and Facebook. I stream on Twitch as well. So by all means, everybody, go follow me in other places, like, subscribe, all of that jazz that I hate doing because self-promotion always seems bad for me, but you got to do it, I guess. Anyway, Happy New Year, happy holidays, love you all. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you on the next Cook Along Live. Good night, everybody.